Good evening. I'm Bill Hoyle. This is my wife Elizabeth. I was born in this community many years ago, over 75. Actually, I was baptized in this church over 75 years ago.
So I was born in Nova Scotia, but when I was 11, we moved to Glenarm, and the first family that came to call on my family to welcome us to the community were the Hoyles. And many years later, I became a Hoyle.
My name is Dave McMillan, and I was raised in the community just west of Glenarm here, and my family attended the church here, and I remember as a young kid being here practically every Sunday.
I'm Faye Nicholson.
I'm Rod Nicholson.
We've lived in Glenarm area all our lives, except for 20 years. We lived in Toronto, but we were still very connected to Glenarm Church when we came home on weekends.
Gord and Henry, and I'm 92 years old. I was born in 1927, and we lived in the house across the road from the church here when we were married in 1948. Yeah.
Well, I was born May the 12th, 1927, and I went out of grade 12 when I was 15. I went to work at Cedar Villa Lodge at Rosedale. I was there 5 years, and then we were married in November, 2 days after the Queen.
My name is Jim Black. I've lived in the community most of my life here, and attend church here at Knox. And when we're talking about this, the only thing I could think of that a lot of people aren't aware of.
John Nicholson, and I get called Jack too, but I'm all the same person. I was born in 1946 in this area just north of here, and I attended this church since as long as I can remember.
My name is Pat Webster.
My name is Marion Kyritz.
Rod and Catherine Boston.
I lived 1 mile north of Glenarm. I attended this church, grew up here, came with my grandpa and grandma, who at one time were caretakers at this church.
Hi, I'm Ron McIntyre. I grew up in the Norland area, but was very familiar with this particular area as I went to high school at Fenelon Falls High.
Where's Sandy and Shirley Abernethy? We lived for a number of years in Mariposa Township, but we are now located in Fenelon. We came here in 1984.
My earliest recollections were of the country store run by Dougal Sinclair, which was in the village of Glenarm, and was a gathering spot. It was the post office as well. There was a counter at the back in which several of the old-timers sat on and communicated the feelings. One of those characters was a fellow by the name of Donald Peter Mackenzie, and was one of the Glenarm characters.
But I'd like to mention my good friend Gord Jameson. He was born on the farm we're on now. He spent his lifetime here. He died in the year 2000, and he was a second dad to us. We could tell a lot of things, but a lot of them you wouldn't want to write down. He really made us feel at home here.
Gordy was a great neighbor. He just was full of the mischief too, you know. He lived to be quite an age, but he wanted to go and see his son in Manitoba. And he thought one day, said to Florence, I wonder if Sandy would take us out there. I'd just kind of like to see John. So we did. And then we told Gordon, we went over one evening, had a game of cards with him, and we said, yes, we'll take you. So we phoned the next morning. He says, I could be ready this afternoon. And that's just the way Gordy was.
I knew Glenarm quite well because I painted here at the window banks. I've known the Websters, Wayne, and his brother Alan very well, and I've been at this church several times for different things. I didn't attend the church regularly because being in Norland, but I know the community, the Nicholsons down the road, and the Grahams, and different people like that.
We lived just about a half a mile down the highway here when there was 5 of us. We used to walk to the church here from there, and then we used to get a ride home with Faye's grandmother and grandfather. There was a great young people's group at that time, and it was Walter Jackson was the minister, and he had, well, there was about 14 or 15, but there was other school or other churches kind of were involved with Glenarm that it made it good, interesting.
I think that's what really got me going to church. Well, we went to church long before that, but that really had me interested in learning about the Bible, and it was such a social time too. We did plays, and we're all over to all other young people's groups, and it was just great, everybody getting together and going to all those things.
Our family always went to the Baptist church in Nova Scotia, but when we moved to Glenarm, my mother said she wouldn't drive by one church to go to another, so we began attending this Presbyterian church, which is, has certainly become home to us.
It was an enjoyable place to come and worship, and we always had family and good social functions that continued on throughout the year.
I also remember the Sunday schools for many years. It was a very large congregation here in the 50s. There were maybe 50, 60 students in the at Sunday school. We met before church, and that was about the time that I met my wife Elizabeth.
We had a lot of fun at this church, a lot of memories. Mr. Jackson, when we were a teenager, was our leader. He had a lot of young people in this church, and we had a lot of fun, a lot of discussions that most of us will never forget.
I just lived down the road from here, and in the wintertime our lanes were terrible at our place, and we used to have to come out across the field to get out onto the highway. And we walked 1.5 miles to school morning and night, and about 5 of us always met and walked together. But in the wintertime when the weather was bad, my dad or our neighbor across the road, Joe Nesbitt, would usually hook up a horse and sleigh and come and pick us up after school to take us home. And when we were young, down at right now it's the variety store down at the corner of Killarney Bay, but Rumney's used to own it years and years ago, and they made an outdoor rink. And everybody used to go down there on Saturday nights and skate, and it was just, our whole family used to go, and they had a carnival once a year, and we'd get all dressed up and go in the races and games and things, and our family usually won the prize for the most people there skating, and it was just a really great time.
At one point in time in the 50s, there was a church shed behind adjacent to the church at the back. And it was quite a large building, and they flooded it in the winter time and created an ice rink. So on Friday nights, all the local folks would come up and would skate.
As young teenagers, we always liked to go to Cambrai and skate on a Saturday night in the arena. It was long before the Newfoundland Township Community Center had been built. And some of the fathers here from the church decided that they would build a skating rink in one of the sheds out back. Do you remember that, Bill?
Very much so. I was very much
so
a part of it.
We had our Saturday night skate parties right here in Glenarm instead of having to go to Cambrai, but there were more boys in Cambrai.
There were several of the things that I do remember from this church, and one of them was primarily the picnics that were held at the 1st of July. They started in 1885 and continued to 1968, and they were massive picnics. There was reports of 500 at one, 1,500 at another. There's a picture from Lindsay Post where it said there was 5,000 in attendance. That may have been a misprint, but obviously there was large crowds. Many baseball games with massive meals following.
Sunday school picnics, growing up with all of the people around my age at that time. There was a lot of good times. We used to have the 1st of July picnic, and I was very small at that, but I remember it quite well.
Some of my fonder memories would be, I guess, of our July 1st picnic that we had here. We had the ball games, which I used to participate in back when I was younger at that age. There were so many people that showed up from our community to participate and be an audience to all these sporting events that went on at that time.
And at one point during the 70s, we had baseball games going for 7 or 6 days a week, and occasionally wanting tournaments on Sunday.
Years ago, I guess the men started playing lob ball here. It was just recreation on Wednesday evenings, and then eventually the girls got involved in it, and we played in tournaments like the Burnt River every year and Cobeconk and places like that, and played teams from around. And Grenville Webster had a boys team here that played out of Glenarm that he coached. And then we decided to have a mixed tournament here at Glenarm, and as you can see by this plaque, the amount of people that played on these teams over approximate 10 years. And we had done it every 1 week every summer for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights.
One of the fondest memories I have is of all our salad suppers we have here, and it's always just a big social event, and everybody comes from all around the neighborhood and from Lindsay and different areas, and we've been doing it for a lot of years, and it's always enjoyed by everyone. And
I started helping the ladies. I wasn't really a member because I only came here on weekends. And the first thing I did when we moved up here was to join the ladies group. I did enjoy all the social events and everything that went on here. I have fond memories of some of the older ladies that used to attend this church, and now I am one of the older ladies.
And we have about 12 members that come to the meetings every month, and we help to raise money for our church through events we have with our ladies group.
It's been a wonderful experience here. Everybody is so friendly and we all get along well. There's no arguing or fighting, and we like to keep it that way.
Another thing about the history of our community here, which really involved a lot of our women folk, was the quilt show we had. In fact, we had 3 of them. The first one was an undertaking we didn't know we were going to be subject to, but we had about 150 quilts, as it turned out, and we had quilts come from all over the place, and there was a wonderful display. With this many quilts coming in on a Friday, we just didn't want to leave them here unguarded, so one night Gordon and Florence slept here at the church, and the next night Sandy and I slept here at the church, and we just kept guard and looked after every quilt, and they all went back to their home. But a wonderful turnout. We had a fella come in from Toronto, and he looked at them all, he wanted to buy one, and we said, oh, we can't sell these don't belong to us, they're just here to show. Well, he said, do you think we could have you make one for us? He had a daughter who was going to be a year old soon, and he said he'd like a quilt just like this one. He had told us that they would like it in cream and green. So we worked with that in mind, and it was quite pretty. Got it done, phoned him, he came and he looked at it, and he and his wife both, and they said, I don't know why we ordered those colors. We really wanted pink and blue. Oh dear. We made another one, and they came together, and they went on their way happy as could be. It was quite a joy, but we did make some money on those quilts. At that time, we decided we needed a quilt every day because there's a lot of tops out there that needed to be quilted. So we started having quiltings every Monday afternoon, and we did that for 20 years. I have to say, one of the big projects that we covered when we were quilting was we put all the cushions on the seats in the pews of our church here.
Liz and I became treasurers about almost 30 years ago, and we found that the occupations in the church, volunteers in the church, is usually a lifetime commitment. And I became a session member in 2002.
We were caretakers of the church at that time, and dusting all those pews, and we had a cat that if we weren't here on Sunday and we didn't lock her in the house, she would come up and go up and down the aisle meowing looking for us. And I didn't work out. I was either at Queen Street Church or King Albert School. And our youngest daughter brought home a paper one day. She wanted to get a summer job, and it had mother's occupation. And I was very annoyed because she put nothing. And her dad laughed, and I didn't think it was funny because I said, well, I do something, put something down there besides nothing.
And going back a lot of years, there was a great big stove that burnt wood in the basement of this church. It was so cold that my grandpa would come Saturday night, fill the stove up, go home, come back in the morning, refill the stove, and our Sunday school started at 1:30 and our church service was at 2:30. So Sunday was a long day.
Another thing that comes to mind is prior to the 50s, the road in Glenarm come directly from the east, come in right to the church, or to the store rather, and went south right past the front door of the church here.
Skating, and it was just a really great time. And I remember Saturday nights we'd go to Fenelon to get an ice cream cone. That was our treat for that time. Meet our friends from school and run around the streets with them for a little while and have an ice cream cone, and parents would meet other parents and visit, and that was sort of our Saturday night entertainment.
What I have a good memory of is Mother used to come to church when she'd come in the horse and buggy or the cutter too, but we sat in the back row here, and there was myself and my 4 brothers, and during the service there would be something crackle a little bit, and there'd be a little bit of a laugh come out of us kids, and I could still feel her pinch when she'd pinch us to keep quiet in church. That was one vivid memory I've had from.
Rod used to come to church in the afternoon, and we would go to his home for supper, or he would come to our home on Sunday evening.
I worked for Bill McGinnis at the garage down in here, and I got to tell you, Bill McGinnis and his wife were great friends of ours, and I only worked a short while for him. And one day he called me into the office, and he said, "Gord, I've been thinking." He said, "You're too good a man to be here." He said, "You can make a lot more money." And he said, "I would suggest you go and have a look around." So my mother and a cousin of hers were talking, and her son run the Chrysler dealership in Bowmanville. So he was right up to see me, and he asked me if I'd come down and work for him. Well, I didn't know what to do. He said, "Come down for 2 weeks and try it out." So I did, and after that they moved us down. And I worked in Bowmanville for two years, and we had 1 daughter at that time, and we were living on the 4th floor apartment, and we had no elevator, so we had to walk steps. So we found out that we were going to have another daughter, and the doctor says, "You have to get out of there. You can't walk up and down those steps." So I come back to Lindsay, and I looked around there, and Fee Motors and Arnold Motors. Arnold Motor was a Dodge dealer, so I went to work for him. But all those years, we were associated with Glenarm, and we felt very much at home here, and I certainly think that it's a great place to have friends.
We were married here in 1966. We had 2 boys. Both boys were baptized in this church. And several of my family members have been both married and buried from it, so it certainly is our home church.
We find this church to be very much of our community, and we hope that the church can continue, but many of these small churches are disappearing. And I think it's only a matter of time and years before this church is going to have to face some of the facts of what's happening to the many of the small churches in our country. I hope that I'm not around to see the day.
And just a great community to live in.
And still is, just everybody is so friendly and so caring, and it's just great being here.
The church has kind of been a cornerstone. Our family has had funerals here, they've had weddings here, so it's just been a wonderful place in my memory.
But then our oldest daughter, who's now going to be 71 in October, she was born in Lindsay, and of course she lived across here too, and everybody loved her. And she used to go down to Sinclair's store, and he learned how to, you push the lids of the cookies over and take a cookie out and go behind the counter, pick up bananas. So I had fun when we moved to Bowmanville, because she just went in the store there and did the same thing. So I had to work a while to get her used to going shopping. But we came back to Lindsay then, to 3 Duke Street, where we lived for 64 years.
Yes, our daughter Ruth is a sculptor. Ruth's had a very interesting career, and it's fun following it. We were in Nova Scotia just this past spring. There was an unveiling of, the chap's name was Gesner. He invented coal oil, and up to that point, they had only been able to use whale oil for lighting and heating and whatever. This was a huge project, probably long overdue for recognition, because he had spent most of his lifetime researching and tabulating different parts of his exploratory mind, and this eventually was recognized in a live bronze, life-size statue, which is just outside Wolfville in Nova Scotia.
I've always known this church to be a very friendly church that welcomed people in, whether they were regular people that would come regularly, or whether they were just visiting. And we've always enjoyed meetings like this tonight with the corn roast and the music after. It's a wonderful time, and I commend the Knox Presbyterian Church in Glenarm and Pastor Caleb for the tremendous invitation to come, and the great fellowship and responsibility they have, welcoming one and all, as we're all important in the body of Christ. So.
But we've had 72 great years. We'll be in November. We've had our ups and downs, as sickness and stuff, but we just can't believe that we're. And Glenarm has always been in our memories all those years.
I think that's a lot of my memories.
That's about all I can think of at the moment.
I think I don't really have anything more I can add to this. Best of luck with your project.
So that's a couple of things that I wanted to put out there.
Anyways, thank you, Mr. Much. Thank you very much.
I think that's it.
I think we're here to stay, and that's the way I like it.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak out, and I wish nothing but my prayers and thoughts are for this church and this community, that may continue to prosper.